Got folks. All right, looks like folks are still coming in. Nice, nice. Give that about a minute or two. While we're waiting, I think we have a short little survey poll prepared. If you want to launch that now, basically trying to get an idea of who's in the audience today. All right. See, folks are still coming in. Oh, yeah, we don't have a poll then. Never mind. Yeah, looks like good number of folks coming in still. So welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome. This is our Affordable Housing Electrification Training Series. My name is Ian Sharples. I am a Sustainable Housing Program Manager here at the California Housing Partnership. This is a session intended for developers and property managers, property owners who are really interested in electrifying their affordable housing properties and really getting us to that carbon-free future that we all deserve. So thank you. People are still coming in. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. So this is the Affordable Housing Electrification Training Series. It's being brought to you today by the California Housing Partnership, SCAMP, the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, as well as the Association for Energy Affordability, AEA. We've got 5 sessions every Wednesday from September 6th, that was last week, to October 4th. They're going from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. We have some additional sessions coming up. Last week, we had the Electrification Design and Technologies presented by Nick Young of AEA. That was a really great session. If you missed it, it's up now on the SCAMP YouTube page. Today, we have IRA, Inflation Reduction Act funding and participation pathways. You're going to hear from Peter Lawrence in a few minutes here. Then coming up next week, we have operations of all electric housing. On September 27th, we have accelerating electrification with solar energy. And finally, the million-dollar question that everybody's been asking, financing and funding of electrification for new and existing affordable housing. And that'll be going on October 4th. Before we get started, I really want to thank our sponsors. We've got Wells Fargo Foundation and Energy Efficiency for All, who provided financial support to bring this to you. We also want to thank our housing partner, SCAMP, for doing a lot of work behind the scenes to help, get the Zoom up and running, also for recording and hosting the recordings on their YouTube. And finally, I want to thank our program partners. You'll hear them mentioned throughout this series. If you're interested in hearing more about them, feel free to contact me or anybody else from the California Housing Partnership sustainability team, and we'll be able to get you in touch. So I want to thank first MCE. Also want to thank BUILD, the Building Initiative for Low Emissions Development Program, Tech Clean California, SOMA, the Solar and Multifamily Affordable Housing, and LIWIP, the Low Income Weatherization Program for Multifamily Housing. These are a bunch of great resources providing funding and technical assistance for affordable housing developers looking to electrify. So definitely give them a Google if you haven't before. So today we've got a really nice program for you. This is going to be our IRA session. So we're looking at trying to unlock the potential of the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're going to break down the different resources for new construction and retrofits. So we'll be hearing about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the rebate programs, HOMES and HERA, as well as some tax credits, including the 45L and the 179D. I'm sure Peter will get into those details in just a few minutes. And one eye-popping figure is that the California Energy Commission estimates that up to $582 million will be anticipated for California. So this is a big deal. It's going to be a big issue on the landscape in the coming year in 2024 and beyond. And I'm really excited to bring this program to you. So without any further ado, I want to hand it over to Peter Lawrence. He is the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations for Novogradac, and he's probably one of the leading IRA experts in the country right now. I've seen him speak before, and this is definitely a really good, really quality invitation. Just a reminder for Q&A. We've got a Q&A box down here at the bottom. Feel free to put your questions in the box, and we'll be getting to them hopefully in real time, or if not, definitely at the end if there's time. Finally, this meeting is being recorded. The recording and slides will be shared afterwards. So that being said, thank you, Peter, and take it away.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you to the California Housing Partnership, SCAMF, and others for inviting me. I'm going to speed through our set of slides because I want to make sure we have time for questions. I know there's a lot of information here, so I don't expect everyone to be able to capture all of it quickly. I recognize this is just one webinar in a series, and I'm sure a lot of these issues will be revisited in future webinars. But I think consider this the overview from the federal perspective, and my colleagues will provide the more California specific perspective on these things. So if we can move on to the next slide. Am I supposed to share my screen on this front, or is it?
If you can, if not, I've got it up.
I can do so.
All right. I can share my screen. I've got the slides up.
I thought I have it shared.
There we go.
Okay. Folks, see Inflation Reduction Act spending provisions?
Yep, that's it.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to start with the various spending-related provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act that affect affordable housing. First one I'm going to talk about, and this is sort of, I did not coordinate this with HUD, but just today, HUD made an announcement on its first wave of awards under this program, the Green Resilient Retrofit Program. It's for owners and sponsors of HUD subsidized Section 202 housing for the elderly, 811 for housing for people with disabilities, project-based Section 8, and Section 236 properties that agree to an extended period of affordability in exchange for getting the Green Resilient Retrofit Program resources. And the total amount available is $1 billion in appropriations, of which about 838 million would be for the cost of providing loans, which could subsidize up to $4 billion worth of loan activity. And then there are a number of other support sources of funding. And there's a wide variety of eligible uses for this funding, and really HUD sort of had a program to essentially follow and build upon from the 2009 Recovery Act. So if I'm going to go on to the next slide. So there are three basic buckets under this program. There's the Elements program, which I mentioned. They had an initial funding announcement today from HUD, and this is designed to provide up to 40,000 a unit or 750,000 per property. And there are several deadlines remaining to apply for this for that bucket of funding. There's what HUD is calling the leading edge cohort, which provides a higher level of funding per unit, 60,000 unit or 10 million per property. and we have the deadlines going forward for that cohort. And then the final cohort is a comprehensive cohort where you could get up to 80,000 per unit or 20 million per property. And we have the remaining deadlines there. And again, I don't have time to go into the very details of each of these cohorts, but if you have HUD subsidized HUD assisted properties that are in need of energy retrofits, this is a great source of funding available. I'll go on to the next
Hey,
slide.
Peter.
Sorry.
I think you're sharing the actual PowerPoint window and not the presentation itself. So we're not seeing you change slides.
Ah, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see the rebate program slide now?
Yeah, now I think we're good.
Apologies on that. I am not the expert in these screen sharing. My apologies. So if I guess I should go back to the previous slide just to so folks can see it. Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
So here's the three buckets I mentioned previously. The elements at 40,000 units, leading edge at 60,000 units, comprehensive at 80,000 units or 20 million per property. And we have the associated deadlines for each of those. Moving on to the rebate programs, Congress also provided the U.S. Department of Energy two rebate programs. The high efficiency electric home rebate program, which is more appliance-based incentive for point of sale rebates for particular electrification upgrades. And I have more examples on the next slide. And there's also the homes rebate, the home energy performance-based whole house rebates. And those are for overall energy cost savings retrofit program, and the rebates range between 2,000 and 8,000 per unit, depending on the income and energy savings. Both of these programs, as I mentioned, are provide guidance from the U.S. Department of Energy and then allocate to each of the state energy offices. And here are some examples of the appliance-based rebate program. And the maximum allowable rebate is 14,000 per unit for all the various appliances. And there is, you can get up to 80%, 50% of the cost for multifamily units serving properties serving 50% or more residents with incomes between 80 and 150% AMI. And then if you have properties that are with 50% or more of the residents with incomes less than 80%, as you might see in a typical low-income housing tax credit property, you can get 100% of the costs covered by the rebate. So here's just an overall, I'm not going to go through all these states, but just to give you a sense of the distributions of the rebate allocations by state. And here is, and by the way, Florida's amount has been rejected, so that amount will be relocated to other states, to potentially to California as well. So this is, that's to be determined. When that information is made available, we'll have that, but we don't have that quite yet. And here's the sort of top 20 states, and you can see California is number 2 here on that list, and you can see it's the 582 million is total available, and we expect California to start to administer those resources in the coming months. And as I mentioned, the closed Florida money will be reallocated. In July, the Department of Energy did release guidance on the rebate programs. And one key question we all had anticipating this guidance is how would the rebate programs work with the low-income housing tax credit? And unfortunately, we weren't able to get concrete guidance, which is not entirely surprising because there wasn't, clear statutory guidance for Department of Energy specifically with respect to the low-income housing tax credit. There's two issues that we're particularly focused on, and that is to make sure, given that it is in essence a rebate, in its essence is a federal grant. So we were concerned that if given directly to properties, that would reduce a housing credit eligible basis, and also potentially any rebate might be considered taxable income. Given that the Department of Energy is silent on these points, it's going to be crucial for the California Energy Commission to provide guidance on how owners and sponsors can avoid those two problems with respect to rebate programs. We believe there are pathways for intermediaries to operate on that front. But this is an issue that the California Energy Commission is going to have to confront when it puts out its specific California-specific guidance. There are minimum spending requirements for low-income and low-income multifamily households under the rebates, at least 10%, which is very much a floor, not a ceiling. And the Department of Energy set that floor in recognition that not every state is going to have the same amount of multifamily needs, but they are ensuring that at least 10% of the rebates will go. And there are incentives for using in-unit, common area, and whole building energy saving opportunities. So it's not designed to address only unit specific issues. And then there's an exchange for getting assistance. Also, there's an affordability standard that developers have to meet. So I know I'm getting a little bit behind schedule, so I'm going to speed up. Another sort of resources that is available on the spending side is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is administered by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. EPA is not generally known for being a grant administering agency, more of regulatory nature, but I think Congress, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, wanted to have EPA involved with setting up, in essence, sort of green bank financing opportunities. And of the $27 billion made available, 20 of that was expected to go towards nonprofit financing entities, and $7 billion for state, local, tribal governments, as well as eligible nonprofits. And then of those two, of the $20 billion going to nonprofits, $8 billion were for low and zero emission projects, $12 billion for emission reduction activities, and then of that $7 billion going to state, local, tribal governments, they're also directed towards zero emission. And that $15 billion in total is designed to go towards low and disadvantaged communities. Earlier this year, EPA provided its initial framework for uses, and then set up 3 separate competitions. I'm going to start with the bottom first. The $7 billion Solar for All is the one that was designed to go towards state, tribal governments, municipalities, nonprofits, and that competition has the deadline has passed for that. But there are 2 more deadlines competitions where application deadlines are coming up. There's the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator competition, and those are two different sources of funding that we believe could be used in a housing context, especially I would say we see both new construction that is for electrification as being a absolutely an eligible use, a retrofit of an existing affordable housing building that provides substantial emissions reductions, and transport-oriented development. All three, I think, are categories that we see as potential for all three of these competitions. And here is the spending implementation deadline. I'm not going to go over this in key detail, but I did want to just highlight some of these upcoming deadlines that are coming up for these spending programs. I'm going to switch now to the tax side. And before I go through the specifics, there are some sort of cross-cutting issues that I apply to a variety of the clean energy tax incentives. In general, there's a sort of a two-tier structure, and a lot of the incentives is a sort of a base rate, and then there's a 5 times bonus rate for facilities meeting certain requirements. And one of those requirements is on prevailing wage and apprenticeship. And this, I will say, this requirement generally does not apply to facilities of 1 megawatt or less, which is sort of the typical. I mean, almost all. I've never heard of a greater than 1 megawatt facility associated with multifamily housing. So I think for the housing audience, these requirements are not necessarily something you need to worry about. But I do want to just note there is this differentiation outside in the greater than 1 megawatt context for facilities that hadn't started construction prior to January 29th of this year. So two other sort of main types of bonuses that are potentially available nationwide are if you adhere to a domestic content requirements, you can get up to 10% increase in the tax incentive for a variety of them. And then if you live in an energy community, which again, I'll talk about in greater detail in a moment. But if you do, you can also get a 10% bonus for that. So I'm going to start with the Section 48 Renewable Energy Investment Tax Credit. That's the typical incentive that has been used to finance solar. And it has been the ITC has been in existence since 2005, but it has gone through a lot of these stop-start situations as Congress has considered, extending it. It did get a somewhat of a longer runway back in 2015 when it got a 5-year extension with a phase-down schedule. But the Inflation Reduction Act gave it a much more robust runway and sort of a retroactively setting it back to 30% starting last year, and having at least an opportunity to operate through the end of 2032, but probably much longer than that, as I'll explain in a moment. And again, here I mentioned that the labor standard issue, if you want the full value of the credit, you're gonna for facilities that are either less than 1 megawatt or meet labor standards if you're more than 1 megawatt. And then here is the details on the domestic content. If your property begins construction before January 1st of 2025, for your solar, you need at least 40%, meaning that domestic content. And right now, it's kind of difficult to meet this. And Treasury did put out some initial guidance that are pretty difficult to meet. We are aware that some providers out there are able to get that, but it's a lot more, I think, expensive in general than the 10% bonus. But we expect that those costs to come down and for it to be easier to meet domestic content over time. Although the thresholds increase over time as well, I think what we expect in terms of the ability for solar developers to meet this requirement will become easier, faster than this schedule outlines in terms of what we understand when we talk to our solar clients. The energy communities, this is available for brownfield sites, census tracts where you had coal mines closed or coal-fired power plants retired, and also for metro and non-metro counties where fossil fuel industries contributed significantly to either the employment or tax base, and those counties had higher than national average unemployment. And so there is a mapping tool the Department of Energy has put out that sort of identifies, and I think many people sort of thought of the energy communities to apply only for the coal areas of Appalachia, et cetera, and so forth. But actually, as you can see here, there are areas of California that are energy communities under the various definitions. And so you should certainly, if you happen to be in one of those shaded areas, that you should start your planning, assuming you're going to meet that, be able to get that 10% bonus. So beyond the domestic content and energy community bonus, there's also a bonus for certain underserved communities, low income and the Indian area, as well as projects in covered federal housing programs, as well as facilities that are designed to benefit low-income households. And so if you're getting just the geographic-based incentive, that's a further 10%. But if there is if your project is designed in conjunction with affordable housing or a community solar where 50% of the benefits are going towards low-income households, then you can get the higher bonus available. This bonus is available over at least the same time period as the ITC, but it is limited to 1.8 gigawatts in each calendar year. And if there's any unused amounts, those can be carried forward. And so that 1.8 gigawatts essentially is divided to two main categories. This, again, the sort of the place-based categories, and the Treasury decided to split it up, at least initially, equally, with 900 megawatts going towards that place-based and another 900 megawatts going for household-based. But of the place-based, 700 would go towards low-income communities, which are essentially new markets tax credit eligible census tracts, and 200 megawatts for Native American communities. And then of the household-based, 200 megawatts were for facilities on affordable housing properties, and 700 megawatts was for low-income economic benefit projects. And you may be wondering, that seems to be a really small portion designed for affordable housing properties. But when you consider that the average facility size is anywhere between 150 kilowatts to 300 kilowatts, generally speaking, that 200 megawatts can go a long way. While the other three categories we expect more developers to go towards the 5 megawatt maximum allowable facility size, and so that you need a higher allocation to meet that, given how much larger the facilities are expected to be. It perhaps is not going to be as competitive as it might look from this initial allocation. I don't have time. There is guidance on the that bonus, and we expect the application for that bonus to open up later this month. Once it does open, there will be a 30-day window to apply. So you should keep an eye out for an announcement when that application is opened and apply, because we imagine there will be there are a lot of folks who are getting themselves ready to apply for that for the 2023 round. Here's just a sort of a summary of all what's possible and compare it to what was the universe prior to the Inflation Reduction Act for the ITC. And you can see here that the amounts available for ITC facilities, for solar facilities, range from 6% to as high as 70%, depending if you meet all the various bonuses possible. And that's a tremendous incentive, especially when you consider that the IRA also, with respect to low-income housing tax credit properties, now allows no basis reduction. So in the past, to the extent that your property got ITC, you had to reduce the amount of housing credits you're eligible for, and that's no longer the case. Another option that the Inflation Reduction provides that is entirely new is the ability to get a direct pay or transfer credits as opposed to employing traditional tax credit equity. So for nonprofits and state and local governments, you can actually apply to get in essence, a tax refund based on your renewable energy facility. We list here all the various different of the clean energy tax incentives, which you can use either direct payment or a transfer. And a transfer essentially means that you don't have to be part of the ownership structure of the facility in order to be able to claim the tax credit. And so this is one way where we expect to broaden the investment pool and the types of investors and ultimately the investor demand for clean energy incentives. And I'll just quickly note that we do have some guidance. There were some hearings on this proposed guidance, but we expect this guidance to be finalized in the coming months, and where you'll be able to learn how to pre-register to be able to accept a direct pay or transfer your credits and further rules. So stay tuned on that front. We do think in general small properties might be where this makes the most sense. The larger the properties, if you're trying to do a portfolio, it may make sense to stay with tax credit equity because you can claim depreciation as well, get the monetize the depreciation benefits as well as the tax benefits, credit benefits. So that's something to keep in mind. So I also want to just walk through what an example tax credit calculation, and this is admittedly a simplified version. If you actually are looking for a real property, this would be a lot more complicated. But we want to really demonstrate the main point of this slide is to really say that with ITC and housing credit, you could substantially cover almost all of your expenses associated with solar, and maybe even actually generate more subsidy than you need, and in essence serve as gap financing for a property. And I will say, this example is simplified. This would be a bond, a simplified bond finance property with 150 kilowatt solar facility installed at $275 a watt. This doesn't have location information, so if these numbers would all change if you were in a QCT or DDA, and a variety of other elements that could change. But the basic point is the same, and that is it can very much cover your solar costs, or maybe even serve as gap financing in many cases. And then I do want to just also point out there another incentive, tax incentive. The 45L credit has also been in existence, like the ITC, since 2005, but prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, was relatively limited in a couple of different ways. One, you could not, the ITC prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, you could not, you had to reduce your housing credit basis by the amount of the 45L credit. And generally speaking, therefore, you only saw the 45L being used in properties with excess basis. And it also only applied to residential buildings of 3 or fewer stories above grade. And so because the energy standard that you needed to compare your energy savings against only applied to those types of residential buildings. And so starting this year, now, given the change from the International Energy Conservation Code to Energy Star, or Department of Energy's Zero Ready Energy Home, those standards apply to all residential buildings, both single family and multifamily, of a variety of sizes. There's no size limitation, and so we expect 45L now to apply to the whole range of multifamily properties, and the fact that you don't have to reduce housing credit basis means that we do think that there'll be a lot more use in that. And here are the various different levels, depending on the Energy Star or the energy standard that you're measuring your energy savings, and whether the property meets prevailing wage or not. So you can receive from $500 per unit to as much as $5,000 a unit. And given that the California QAP does essentially require a minimum Energy Star, you might as well get a credit for meeting that standard. And one comment I know we've heard is that there are not a lot of contractors out there that are qualified to measure compliance with 45L, but we see more and more of those contractors coming online every month, and we expect the costs to come down as a result. So this is something I think we're going to see many, many more properties, adhering to and receiving 45L assistance going forward. And then the last sort of incentive I'm going to cover in this webinar is the 179D energy efficient commercial buildings deduction, which applies to multifamily properties as well. And this incentive only does apply to the rest of the multifamily universe, given the standard that you use to determine compliance, which is the IRA 90.1 standard. That is a deduction, and unfortunately, this deduction still does reduce housing credit basis. So we don't anticipate wide usage in the housing credit universe, unless your property is, past its credit claiming period, or even its initial compliance period. If it's in its extended use period, maybe, and you're doing a light rehab, this might be something you want to investigate. But it is, there's a varying amount of deduction you can take depending on your energy savings. And again, I don't have time to go over all the details, but this is something you may want to investigate for certain types of properties. And here is the tax implementation timeline. And I just want to get a sense of what we're looking forward going forward. We're, as I mentioned, we're looking at making sure waiting for that application guidance and the window to be opened up later this month. Once that comes open for the ITC and the bonus ability, that will trigger a 30-day application period. And then after that, it will be a rolling basis to the extent there is remaining allocation available from that 1.8 gigawatts. And we anticipate the Treasury may tweak the competition and the allocations for 2024 based on what they see with the initial round of applications. And frankly, I do think, given the nature of the housing credit development cycle, we don't expect a lot of housing credit properties to get financing this year. We expect a lot higher percentage happening next year. That is, I think, the last slide I have, and I see there are a lot of questions available, but I'll stop there and see if my colleagues want to continue with their parts of the presentation, or if we want to stop here and have questions.
Hi, Peter. Yeah. So we've got a good number of questions in the Q&A. We've got about 30 minutes left. I think I want to hand it over to Andrew for a few moments to provide some additional California-specific context, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Reminder, we've got the Q&A box down at the bottom, and we'll get into the questions there. So thank you again, Peter. Wonderful presentation. We got some good questions, but for now, it's going to be handed over to Andrew Dawson. Andrew is a policy advocacy manager with the California Housing Partnership. He works a lot on sustainable housing legislation, including advocacy around things including the Equitable Building Decarb program, as well as the IRA. Real smart dude. Give him a big virtual round of applause.
Hi, everyone. I just want to thanks Peter for that presentation. It was a really great overview of kind of everything IRA related. I just want to talk a little bit about kind of California's role and kind of what we've been doing at CHPC in terms of advocacy related to IRA and kind of what you expect to see moving forward. So the state in general has kind of two pots of funding related to homes that are housing that is coming to the state or will be coming to the state. The first Peter talked about was the rebate programs from the DOE. So this is the Homes in Here program. And this is around $600 million. And this will be coming to the CEC, the California Energy Commission, to distribute. The California Energy Commission is also building out another program right now called the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program. That program has about $900 million for building retrofits, things like that, for electrification. And so what the CEC is trying to do, and they're talking to DOE about this, is using that Homes in Here money to backfill the EBD program, or be able to use the EBD program, the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program, as a conduit for that money, instead of having all these separate programs. So right now, the Energy Commission is in conversation with DOE on how to best do this. There are some hiccups. One example of this hiccup is that the Homes program and the Here program cannot be layered for the same, cannot be used for the same appliance. And so there's going to have to be some differentiation there, and the CEC is going to work that out. If the CEC can use the Homes in Here money for this Equitable Building Decarbonization Program, the money will come out much faster. Whereas if not, they're going to have to build out a new program, and that's not going to start until January of next year, or January of this year. And so then we're really waiting to see kind of what the CEC is doing there with regards to the money coming in from the IRA. The other big pot of funding that Peter talked about was a Solar for All program. So this is part of the Cal EPA, or the EPA's GGRF funds, greenhouse gas reduction funds. This is going to be applied by the iBank. So this is part of the California state government, and they're applying for up to $400 million. They already put in their kind of application or intent to apply and everything like that, and hopefully we get it. This money, in a lot of ways, is going for solar. So this might go for community solar, and probably some of it will be going to community solar, as well as just solar, rooftop solar on affordable housing specifically. And we're not going to hear back about that for a little while now. But the California has already put in their application, has already been kind of at the forefront of both of this stuff. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit with the California Housing Partnership and kind of what we've been doing is the tax credits. And Peter talked about a little bit about the direct pay option. And we're doing analysis here with the partnership, as well as with some other people, about how that impacts affordable housing specifically, and kind of what does direct pay and how does it layer with kind of the current LIHTC system, and when would we want direct pay versus something else, or kind of more traditional system. And so we're doing that analysis right now. We're trying to figure that out right now as that kind of gears up kind of towards the beginning of the year, when people could start applying for more of the tax credits and get a lot of that. I'm gonna leave it there. I just want to have, so we have a lot of time for questions, because I know there's a lot for the IRA, and I'll just kind of pop in and out as questions come in, depending on kind of what Peter says and kind of my California context and what we've been hearing here.
Cool, thank you, Andrew. So I'll be asking questions in the order they came in. I think I'll just start at the top here. So one of the questions that Krista had, and I think Andrew, you answered this in the chat, but just for everybody, are these provisions just for residential, or is multifamily also eligible?
That's to me or to Andrew?
Either one.
In general, a lot of them apply to both. There are, incentives that are only for multifamily, like 179D. That's only multifamily properties. And there are actually, we didn't discuss, there are other tax incentives that are only for single family, like the 25C and 25D, which are somewhat analogous to the having ITC added to a multifamily property, or the energy cost savings in 45L in the single family context. But the 45L can be used for all types of residential properties. The rebates can be used for both single family and multifamily. HUD, of course, is HUD assisted properties typically are all multifamily properties. And the greenhouse gas, there's no limitation on whether it's a single family or multifamily.
It's a good lead into a question that Scott asked, speaking of HUD assisted properties. Can these rebates apply to tax credit properties that utilize project-based vouchers?
So, we're still waiting for the, each state has to put out its guidance. We've got the initial guidance from the DOE, where they have they have to have the minimum amounts for multifamily, minimum amounts for low-income households. And the California Energy Commission is going to take that DOE guidance and translate it in. The key issue here for tax credits is we do need to, again, the typical way you address the two issues with respect to housing credit eligible basis and whether it's taxable income is to have the proceeds be loaned into housing credit partnerships. That's the typical way you're able to vote that. So the California Energy Commission really essentially has to put out guidance on how perhaps you could have a third party intermediary accept the rebate, but then loan it to a housing credit property. And so I encourage folks to reach out to Andrew and Ian to work with the California Energy Commission to get that guidance out there. We think it is certainly the DOE guidance allows for the possibility, but it is silent. There's no specific guidance in it, it's an unfortunate reality. We wouldn't expect to have explicit guidance on that front, given that the statute didn't have the flexibility for DOE to do that. But I think certainly it is within California Energy Commission's ability to offer that guidance.
I'll just add on to what Peter was saying. Here at the partnership, we've been part of this working group to provide kind of assistance and advice to the National Association for State Energy Offices. So we've been working with a group of people across the US and talking to energy offices and how to use these rebate programs and how to structure these programs. The CEC has been working with us as well on how to do this kind of work. Happy to talk to anyone about that. And if you have any ideas or kind of considerations we should be talking to CEC specifically about, let us know, or for energy offices across the US, let us know. But yeah, that is definitely something we're looking at, and we want it to be definitely for tax credit properties.
Cool. So then Scott also put in the Q&A box, probably a different way of asking the same question, maybe a little different. So at this point, do the rebates only apply to public housing and not tax credit properties? I think if you could touch on the public housing aspect of this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we expect, and actually I should point this out, that the HUD green retrofit program does not apply to public housing, by the way. So that's one thing. We've got that question occasionally. Unfortunately, it's for privately owned HUD assisted stock. And so public housing cannot get that. But there's no bar on public housing getting the rebates. But if a public housing property is doing a RAD conversion and is using mixed finance with tax credits, again, the issue of eligible basis and taxable income will be key, and where we hopefully will get California's Energy Commission's guidance on how to do that. But yeah, no, it's any residential property should be able to get the rebates as long as you meet the minimum guidelines, right? Where at least 10% of the resources in the state go towards multifamily, that you meet requirements on low income. And again, the amount of rebate you can get is dependent on the types of rebates or the types of appliances, the level of cost savings, and the income levels that you're targeting.
Thank you, Peter. I've got another question. Are the base credits still available as they have been in the past? An owner doesn't need to apply for these, correct? So kind of how do these new rebates and tax credits interact with the existing ones?
Well, I'm guessing the question is getting at the ITC, and that's right. Actually, one thing that I know folks in the affordable housing context are sometimes a little surprised at. ITC is an as of right credit. You build a facility, it's eligible, you get it. It's not. There's no application. There's no limit on the amount of ITCs that theoretically can be available. So you're as of right, any ITC facility can get at least that 6% level. And if you are less than a megawatt, you can get a 30% as a base amount. And if you're over a megawatt, as long as you meet the labor requirements, you can get that 30%. And then if you are definitely in an energy community, you get that 10%. You don't have to apply for it. When you submit the documentation to you're beginning construction on that facility, if you demonstrate in that application that you're bidding construction in an energy community, you get that 10% right from the start. You can count on it. There's no application for it. And then similarly, if you could document that your facility meets the domestic requirement, in other words, either the iron is 100% from the US, or if the manufactured components, at least 40% of them, are either are manufactured in the US, and then you get that bonus. There's no application process for it. There is the application process for that bonus for low-income communities, Indian areas, affordable housing, and low-income economic benefit projects. And so certainly, if there's more than 1.8 gigawatts worth of applications that are eligible, then there will be a limit there. But in general, there's no application for it. You absolutely get it.
Awesome, thank you. A lot of good questions coming in. I see a couple more on ITC, so I want to group those together while we're discussing it. I'm gonna hand two questions to you at the same time. The first one is a quick clarification of what do you mean by domestic content? Sounds like materials that are manufactured in the United States. And then you just mentioned the ITC application. Is there any idea of what the bonus ITC application will entail?
Well, we anticipate, that you have to apply for one of those four categories I mentioned, either a low-income community, or Indian area, or affordable housing, or low-income economic benefit projects. And I will note that under the guidance that Treasury released, if your facility applies under 3 or 4, then you're automatically forced to go into those categories. Because we anticipate, we've gotten a lot of questions like, what if you're both in a low-income census tract and you're doing affordable housing? Which one do you want to pick? Do I have to pick one? Do I have to? And Treasury guidance appears to say that if you have an affordable housing project, you've got to apply to category 3. Or if you're having a community solar project where you expect to meet the low-income economic benefit requirements, you have to go in 4. Only if you're not in those categories, but you want to build your solar facility in a low-income community or a Native American, those separate pots apply. And I think you'll have to demonstrate readiness to that you are able to proceed on that ITC project, and that you meet the requirements that are laid out in the guidance. And if you do qualify and you apply between that in that 30-day window, Treasury did say that if they get more than, say, 200 megawatts worth of applications in that 30-day window, they are going to do a lottery system where as long as you've been confirmed that you did meet the requirements, then they're just going to pick out a hat. There's not going to be some sort of competitive basis to that, and it's basically the lottery system will determine your order in that 200 megawatt queue, so to speak. And if you are, let's say, that 201st unfortunate facility, you still could potentially get, if there aren't enough applicants in the other 3 categories for this year, or Treasury could consider you for the future year allocation. It's not, Treasury's not required to, but it appears that you may be able to do it that way too. So just I think, I mean, if you have further questions on this, I'm more than happy to speak offline, but certainly want to encourage folks to apply if you think you are ready and be able to use it this year.
Cool. So speaking of readiness, we have another question about ITC. Do you know the timeline required for installation of the solar system in order to apply for the ITC?
So there's this notion of commencing construction, and there are a variety of ways under the guidance for the ITC that you can demonstrate that you are commencing construction. So you could, if you have purchased the key elements of your solar facility, a certain percentage of those costs, if you can demonstrate that is one way you can demonstrate you're commencing construction. But again, it's not like you apply and there's a competitive process. You just have to demonstrate that you're eligible, that your facility is eligible, and then once your facility is placed in service, you claim the credit. And I should have mentioned this. It is, you get the ITC in the year it's placed in service. It's a 1-year credit, unlike on a housing credit where you claim it over 10 years. You get it in that same year the facility is placed in service. You do have a 5-year compliance period, so you demonstrate compliance over the 5 years after you place in service. But it's again, there's no application period, and there's no sort of limit to the amount of ITCs that can be claimed in any 1 year.
Cool. We've got 2 more questions on ITC from Keith Bloom, and I think we can move on to a couple questions for Andrew. So the first question is actually the latest one they put in, but we're talking about solar. And Keith asked, does the ITC apply only to solar or also to battery storage in a LIHTC project?
Oh, I think Peter froze. So
Oh no, sorry, I thought that was directed towards Andrew. The ITC absolutely can be used for both the generating facility and for batteries. In the past, your batteries had to be connected to a generated facility, but now the ITC can be used just for energy storage as well. Yeah, it can be used in a variety of projects. The IRA did expand that eligibility.
I would add on to that also the Solar for All program will also include battery storage as well. And right now there's a proceeding at the PUC that has to do with solar and multifamily. And we are advocating on certain aspects of it so that battery storage can be more easily included or more easily installed in multifamily housing. Just a little bit more context there.
Cool, thank you both. And then last one on the ITC, I promise. If a California LIHTC low-income housing tax credit project would apply for ITC funding early next year, approximately when would that project have an ITC commitment that it could include on its CDLAC, California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, or TCAC, Tax Credit Allocation Committee applications as a committed equity source? So another question about the time frame there.
So I hate to sound like a broken record here, but you don't have to apply to ITC. As long as you demonstrate that your facility is eligible, you get it. So there is a form at the IRS that you can apply to demonstrate that you've commenced construction on your ITC facility. And I'm sure, I believe that CDLAC or CTEC could accept that form as evidence that you do have an ITC facility that is in the pipeline, so to speak. And I would anticipate that you could document that, for instance, that facility is expected to meet the domestic content requirement, or you're in an energy community, and therefore demonstrate. There is going to be the tricky thing here that we've heard lots of complaints from is on the bonus, because that is an application period, and we do have this 30-day period that's opening up. It's going to be extremely challenging to address for projects seeking 2023 housing credit allocations to also use this bonus. And so that's why I expect it'll be a lot more straightforward, and we'll get a better sense in 2024 for that bonus. So, but in terms of, if you've got an ITC facility right now that's in the pipeline, ready to go, that you don't have to apply for it. If you're not, doing it, trying for the bonus, you automatically will get that, either 30 or 40 or 50, depending on the domestic content energy community bonuses.
Cool. We've got 7 more questions in about as many minutes, so I'm gonna call this lightning round. The first one Andrew already answered in the Q&A box, but I want to read it out for everybody just so I know. What do you mean by homes and HEC can't be layered for the same appliance? Is this appliance types or the stacking subsidy on the same physical unit? And to clarify, that is the stacking subsidy on the same physical unit. Just so everybody's clear on that. And then another one for Andrew on homes. You gave 2 scenarios for homes and HERA money, depending on whether CEC can use EBD as a conduit for the funding. For each scenario, can you give a rough time range of when that money might actually be on the street available for projects?
Yeah, so if it can be layered through EBD, we expect the EBD program to start giving out money kind of around March, if not a little bit earlier next year. And so you could expect money to start going into there. If they have to build a new program, we're looking at kind of later next year, kind of towards the end. Probably around October time.
Cool. All right, let's see. I've got a couple 45L questions. One is the section 45L also a deduction? Peter answered that it is a tax credit, not a deduction. 179D is a deduction. But another question on 45L is, are the contractors doing 45L mostly union contractors? Or another follow-up to that would be, are there any sort of prevailing wage requirements for the 45L?
So on 45L, if you meet prevailing wage requirements, you're able to get a much higher tax credit, depending on your energy standard. And certainly, we see if you have, for instance, a housing credit property that has HUD financing of a sufficient amount, you're required to meet prevailing wage in that circumstance already, and therefore you're eligible for the higher amounts. But if you have a housing credit only assisted property, and you don't have any other sources of federal financial assistance, you're not required to meet prevailing wage. You'll get a lower amount as a result, and therefore we are aware of 45L work being done by both union and non-union, depending on the circumstance. But certainly, if you want that higher level, you're going to get you have to pay prevailing wages, and the lion's share of the prevailing wage work is being done by union contractors.
Awesome. I've got 2 questions here about 179D, now that we've mentioned it. The first one is from Dick. 179D can be split tax savings between the designer of the system and the nonprofit entity, for example, a public housing authority. Is there precedence for this? I guess the tax split.
Yes, there is 179D can be transferred to a limited extent. It's not the same as the tax credit transfer more generally. It's not, unfortunately, you can't claim a direct payment, by the way, on 179D or 45L for that matter. And 45L, the transfer doesn't work in that same way, but 179D certainly does. And it's most often used in government finance properties. So obviously governmental units don't pay taxes and therefore don't need a tax incentive, and therefore that can be transferred. But to the designer or architect or whatever. So there is that ability to split the tax incentive there.
All right, I've got a multi-part question on the 179D from Tim Kohut. Always with the good questions, Tim. Are 179D allocations for new construction eligible for direct payment to qualifying nonprofits? Also, for new construction, assuming that we go with Energy Star Homes as our pathway for multifamily, is payment made from the Treasury Department?
Okay, unfortunately, neither 45L nor 179D is eligible for direct pay, so you can't use that. So you're going to need to get an investor to take advantage of the 179D credit, or the deduction, as the case may be. So and we have heard. Actually, we've gotten feedback as I've given similar presentations in other contexts, that there are some housing credit investors who are not interested in 45L tax credits, and potentially also even ITC in some circumstances. But there's certainly a possibility. You're not forced to go with your housing credit investor. There are other investors out there that are interested in those incentives. So, and if you need help with navigating that, I can say, Novogradac, and I'm sure others are able to help navigate that process.
Yeah, Tim has a follow-up question. If the 179D does not allow for direct payment, have any developers of affordable housing figured out how to monetize the tax credits? Do we need to syndicate these or negotiate discounts with architects? We're also running up against time, so if everybody's willing to hang on, we could probably answer the other 3 questions. If not, enjoy your lunch.
So yes, I mean, you do need to syndicate the benefits to be able to take advantage of it. And I will say, in affordable housing context, again, as I mentioned, that you have to reduce your housing credit basis. So we don't see it very often outside, with housing credits. But certainly, if you're doing a light rehab on a property in a year 15 or later, we have heard that circumstance, some folks be able to syndicate 179D. It's a limited universe. It's much. I would have to say we expect far more interest in 45L now that it's opened up to all types of residential properties and not just those 3 stories or less.
Cool. And then we've got kind of a broader question from Ashley. What sources are applicable to new construction homeownership housing? Are any of these sources available for that type of housing?
Yeah, there are a wide variety. I mean, the HUD Green Retrofit program by definition is not available for new construction. But a lot of the other sources of rebates, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the 45L can be used. In fact, I know some people have thought that 45L is only for new construction, but they define new construction actually fairly broadly. Substantial rehabilitation also applies. So, but certainly, and I will say that we expect the 45L credit may be used for new construction home ownership, absolutely. And there's actually, I think that has been the predominant use prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, because of the fact you had to reduce your housing credit eligible basis prior to Inflation Reduction Act. But we expect to continue to be used for single family home ownership developments as well.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question from Jean DiMaria. Can an electrification project include adding a new heat pump HVAC to a space where no HVAC existed previously?
I'm not 100% sure the answer to that question. Andrew, do you know by any chance?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe you can use it for a heat pump HVAC system. Yeah.
We stumped Peter. I feel like that's a good place to end up on. There's one last question from Thomas about the ITC. Does it apply to multifamily projects where only a fraction of the units are affordable? Just a quick yes or no.
Absolutely yes.
Cool. All right. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Again, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Andrew. Fantastic presentation. Seeing some kudos in the chat there for you all. Once again, also, thank you to our program partners, MCE, Build, Tech Clean California, SOMA, and LIWIP. Thank you to Scamp for setting up the Zoom session and the recording. And then thank you to our financial sponsors, Wells Fargo Foundation and Energy Efficiency for All. Reminder, we do have sessions coming up. Next week, we'll have the operations of all electric housing, after you got it built, how do you actually run it? Really important questions, really good content on that one. And then finally, thank you all for being here. It's a really good day.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Have a good one.